Well, good afternoon to everybody, and I would like to start by welcoming all of you to this last webinar of the webinar sessions Flipped IRSPBL 2021. My name is Aida Guerra, and I'm part of the organizing team, and I will just quickly start by welcoming our moderator, Professor Eric de Graaf. Also, welcome, and thank you very much. And then he will be in charge from now on. Eric, whenever you feel free, we can start. You are muted. You are muted, Eric.
Yes. I will try again.
Thank you.
This time with sound. I have the habit of switching off the sound because otherwise, if everyone keeps the sound open, we get too much noise going around, and then I forget to switch it on again. So working online is something to get used to, but I'm very grateful that we have this opportunity to see each other and to meet in a virtual reality. And I hope that this last session for the IRSPBL, that it will be a very successful and interactive session. We have 3 presentations. It's going to be brief presentations defined in terms of 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5, but then I will cut it most certainly. And with these presentations, there will be no more than 4 slides, or in one case, I understand, a video. So we have some input, but the main thing is that we are going to discuss this input together with all the people who are participating here. So it is good to be muted when there is one person presenting and that person is speaking, but after that, I expect you to unmute yourself and to start the discussion jointly. It is also possible to write questions that need to be answered by the presenters in the chat. So we have a reminder what the discussion will be about. I will leave it to each of the presenters to give a very brief introduction of themselves. And I would like to start right now with the 2 Carolas from Colombia. Can I give you the word, Carola?
Yes, Eric, thank you so much for your introduction. Yes, I'm Carola Gomez. I'm from Colombia. And Carola Hernandez, the other author, she says hello because she just confirmed that she wasn't going to be able to be here, but she sends her love also. And I'm a PhD student of education, and she's my tutor, she's my director. So we're really glad to be able to be here. That would be all, Eric, if you can pass the video, I think.
Hello everyone, I am Carola Gomez and I'll be presenting to you our research named Developing Teamwork Skills in a Multidisciplinary Project-Oriented Course. Teamwork is a particularly complex competence that demonstrates 2 types of essential skills. Those oriented to the task, such as planning, organizing, and monitoring, and those oriented to the socio-emotional care, such as communicating, collaborating, and empathizing. POPBL is a curricular model that favors the development of both types of teamwork skills. The Multidisciplinary Engineering Design Project, MEDP, is a POPBL course offered by the Department of Engineering of the Universidad de los Andes since 2018 to the engineering programs of the department. The teamwork pedagogical strategy of the course was embedded in the 4-phased engineering design methodology, CDIO, of 4 weeks long each. Based on the learning cycle perspective, doing, observing, thinking, and planning, every design phase, CDIO, became a teamwork skills learning cycle itself. Every cycle starts with the observation of the last teamwork concrete experience to make the lived process evident. This is followed by the abstract conceptualization or thinking of the experience observed, where students become familiar with teamwork theory. Then, the team plans how to address their teamwork in the current engineering design phase through a teamwork contract document. Finally, the next 4 weeks become the concrete teamwork experience that leads to a new teamwork skills learning cycle in the next design phase. Based on this methodology, the research question that arises is, what are the achievements of implementing the proposed teamwork pedagogical strategy in the course? Data was collected from a qualitative approach through focus groups, students' written reports, and teamwork assessment rubrics, and with the participation of 6 work teams of 5 members each on the course of fall 2019. The 4 learning cycles showed how students started with the course with a strong orientation to the task and ended up the course with some awareness of the socio-emotional abilities important to efficiently complete the tasks. Before the course, their usual strategy for teamwork was to divide the project requirements, to realize them individually, and to put them together in a single document to be delivered within the proposed time frame. By the end of the course, students were more aware of the teamwork abilities related to the socio-emotional care. According to one student, it was very important for me to understand that communication problems can be a big obstacle. Discord among teammates do not allow progress at all. Empathy and good relationships can be as important as the individual work. Developing competences such as teamwork within a project-oriented course requires a clear pedagogical strategy towards this goal. Though the strategy implemented in MEDP did improve to some extent students' teamwork skills, a further development of these abilities requires for teachers to assure the students' continuous participation in similar pedagogical scenarios. Thank you for your attention.
Hello friends.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to do just what I would have done in a real life session. After the presentation, not questions, not discussion on the content, but is there anything that people would like to ask that was not clear? So we can clarify that right away. So is there anyone who needs some clarification to one of the points in the presentation? No? If not, then we can move on to the second presentation. And Pretty, can you make a start? Please come in.
My colleague, yes, Dr. Guerra, it's the recorded presentation.
Okay.
Hello friends. I am Sanjeev Kavale from KLA Technological University, India. I will be presenting the work on crafting design problems for project-based learning in first year undergraduate engineering education. Me, along with my colleagues Preeti Baligar, Kaushik and Gopal Krishna Joshi have worked on this particular research. Before I proceed further, I would like to thank IRSPBL team for giving us this opportunity. The curriculum and learning experiences in engineering education have to focus on the knowledge, skills, and values that will prepare students to solve workplace problems. Practicing engineers commonly solve design problems, troubleshooting problems, system analysis problems, and decision-making problems. These types of problems are complex and are essentially ill-structured. To develop competency in solving such problems, pedagogies like project-based learning and problem-based learning are designed around ill-structured problems and are adopted in engineering education. Either problem-based learning or project-based learning both assume problems at the centrality. These problems should embody the main two core constructs, which are knowledge and skills. The problems should enable problem solver to demonstrate these constructs. Moreover, the problem should be difficult and attainable at the same time. Crafting such problems is a challenging task. Literature related to crafting problems is not abundant. Two popular frameworks are frequently referred, which are 3C3R conceptual framework and a design problem framework using adaptation innovation theory. However, literature is scarce on crafting problems for project-based learning for solving design problems in first-year undergraduate education. With this, let me now show the research question of this study. How to craft design problems for interdisciplinary design experiences for project-based learning in first-year undergraduate engineering education. The proposed research study originates in a first-year undergraduate engineering course titled Engineering Exploration. The enduring outcomes of this course are engineering design process, multidisciplinary nature of engineering problem solving, and teamwork. The output of this design experience is a mechatronic prototype for the design problems given to the students. These problems are crafted by instructors of this course. The crafted design problems are analyzed using the Jonasson and Hung's framework of problem difficulty. The framework is divided into two aspects: complexity of the problems and structuredness of the problems. And these are the parameters considered for analysis. For design problems, the authors have reinterpreted breadth of knowledge as knowledge and skills required to fabricate the prototype. In a PBL course, the need for learning and application of new disciplinary knowledge is inherent in the pedagogy. Further, the design problems have an additional layer of difficulty as their output is a physical artifact. Accordingly, a careful study of the prototypes developed for the selected design problems was done. We were able to classify design problems into 4 categories, which are shown below. The problems are least complex if there is no new knowledge or skills being learned, and prototypes can be developed with ready components, while the problems become extremely challenging if there is new knowledge to be learned and prototype is to be built using custom-made parts. Next, we will look into relational complexity. Relational complexity is described as number of relations that need to be processed during a problem-solving process. The authors have studied this parameter from the perspective of number of functions or processes and their dependencies demonstrated in the prototype. Functional dependencies are depicted using solution graphs in our case. A solution graph is a graphical exemplification of the functions appearing in the solution. Example solution graphs are shown here. Those problems with unidirectional functions with less or only one in degree are observed to be less complex, while the problems which need feedback and more in degrees are observed to be more complex. Lastly, we will look into structuredness. According to Jonasson and Hung, structuredness of a problem arises from the number of unknown elements in the problem. For any problem, there will be an initial state, goal state, and means or operators to achieve the goal state from initial state. The same is true even for design problems. It is observed that those problems which have narrow scope of openness or closed initial state and goal state will have least complexity, while the complexity increases with open goal state and becomes extremely complex with open initial state as well. To conclude, problems are central to learning in PBL courses. Crafting of design problems plays an important role, requires maturity, and consumes lot of efforts. This research work gives an idea about the complexity of the problems beforehand while in crafting stage itself. However, this work is limited to the experiences at first year engineering and specifically to design problems. How these parameters of complexity manifest and interplay in other types of problems and in later years of engineering is an open question. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Now I am open for questions.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I would like to restrict the audience to the questions that are about unclarities, things they have not understood in this presentation, and we reserve the more content-oriented questions for the plenary debate. Is there anyone who has a question at this stage? No, it seems not. Then we just finish up with the third presentation. Lisette, will you start introducing yourself and
Yes.
then give your presentation?
Okay, I hope you can see my slides now because I'm doing it live instead of a video. Hi, I'm Lisette Winia. I'm from Erasmus University and I've conducted this research together with Gerard Noordzij, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but also sends her greetings today. We studied the development of motivation in a 3-year bachelor program, a psychology bachelor program. Because our institute implemented problem-based learning with the goal of increasing students' motivation. However, we never investigated over time. And of course, there are reasons why problem-based learning can be motivating due to the problems, but also the student-centered nature. But we wanted to see how actually it developed through time and whether or not we did see increases in motivation from the first to the third year. We measured several types of motivation, especially 7 types of motivation. We based it on the self-determination theory, and they measured different types of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is, of course, because you find the readings interesting, or because you find it interesting to improve yourself, or you really experience enjoyment by learning new things. However, there are also different types of extrinsic motivation. Some are more positive, like when you experience a lot of value in your learning. However, others are less optimal, like when you only study because you want to prove yourself or because you want to get a prestigious job later on. And of course, it's also possible to be amotivated and then you actually see no reason in doing the coursework or the studying at all. So we measured 7 types of motivation and we looked at different indicators of change and stability. We had 2 measures that looked more on the sample level. So basically whether or not correlations of the same measure, for example, one of the intrinsic measure, whether or not over time, we measured it 4 times, whether or not it was stable or not. And we found that overall, when you look at the same construct, the correlations were large for most of the time points, at least larger than 0.50, but however, all correlations were also lower than 0.80, so it's not that they were entirely stable. We also looked at mean level changes, so whether or not it changed from the beginning of the first year to the end of the third year. And some of the construct didn't show any change, whereas some others showed a slight increase or decrease over time, but there were not very large changes. However, what we that was more important and what we focus on more is that it's important to look at the individual level, because if you look at the sample level and you calculate means and compare them across the entire sample, you have some students who increase in motivation, whereas others decrease on certain constructs. And that is what we also investigated. We investigated how many participants or the percentage of participants who showed an increase and how many showed a decrease. And we indicated a few percentages on this slide here. And as you can see, the minus sign is for a decrease and the plus sign is for an increase. There is a large group of students who show a decrease in motivation across several time points, but there is also a group that is substantial that shows an increase and a smaller group who stays the same. So what we conclude about this, that then you look at the sample level and only look at the means, you will not find any evidence in your curriculum that PBL is intrinsically motivating. At least we didn't find it. However, when you look at the more individual level, there are some students who do seem to increase in motivation, whereas others seem to decrease. And our next step is to focus more also on the individual level and also to see if we can identify subgroups with certain motivational profiles, because and to take into account all the scores on the different motivational constructs, because it's possible that there are some that have a more optimal profile, only scoring high on the intrinsic motivation levels, whereas lower on the extrinsic types, and whether or not those are stable. And what we want to conclude with this is that it could be possible that PBL, or at least as how we apply it at our university, is more effective for certain groups of students. And we want to know if we can identify the students and also identify the students who are less experiencing it as fun or as motivating, how we can help those and to see if we can make it better for them. Well, thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them. I will stop
Thank you
sharing
very
now.
much, Lisette, for your presentation. Are there at this stage any questions for Lisette about what was not clear in the presentation? If not, I would like to move on to the more general discussion, and that basically gives the floor to everyone who would like to ask questions. There is one in the chat. Okay. Who would like to make an opening question, comment on one of the presentations? You can raise your hand. You can raise your hand in the reactions, or you can do it on screen. Pretty, would you like to make a first comment?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Graf.
Oh,
I have a question.
If I pronounce your name wrong.
No, it's perfect. It's just right. I have a question for the first presenter from Colombia. It was during the presentation, she says that students become aware of the teamwork theory. I really want to know at what stage do students become aware of the teamwork theory and how is it done?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for your question. It is actually not that really clear at a precise stage where they became aware, but it was more due to the
Ida, are we losing contact?
I think we might have lost. Carola mentioned that her connection was not good.
If you have the image, you can see the image freezing, but now it is more difficult to find it out. Shall we hope she gets back and stay with this question for the moment? And
okay,
perhaps move on to another question until Carola can be back online. See, now we lost her completely. Who would like to try another question?
I actually have a question.
Very good.
If I may. Thank you very much. I think this question can actually touch upon the two last presentations, because I see motivation and then I see problem design, and then I think about the learning curve, basically. So I think, and I work with students in the first year, and what I see is that sometimes the problem design for them is a challenge. And if it is too difficult as a task, they kind of lose the motivation on that sense. And if actually it's too easy, they just go straight and they don't actually have a reflective component as deep as, unless we kind of force them to that. So my point is actually, in one way, to Preti and Sanjeev, if they can actually see if something related to motivation when students engage in actually defining their problems, and if the problem is as open, and the more the problem is open and complex, that motivation kind of changes. And if actually Lisette also somehow sees that to some extent in her experiences.
Who would like to start answering? Yes, Sanjeev.
Hello, Ida. Yes, Professor Eric. I would like to answer to the question which is asked by Ida. The kind of the work which we have done is basically where the problems are crafted by the instructors. We have not asked the teachers to, or instructors to, students to craft the problems. Instead, the problems were crafted by the teachers and then given to the students. In a way, when we are crafting the problems, or when the instructors are crafting the problems, it is ensured that all all problems are of the equal level as such. I don't know what should I say it, level or some kind of a standard. So we try to ensure that everything on every problem are of equal balance as such. But what, like you said, if students themselves are crafting the problems, then definitely students' motivation study could be a huge challenge, which we may do such kind of a study as well. Right now, this study, the kind of the study which we have explained here is done for first year engineering. We don't have a practice where the first year engineering students do the problem crafting for their, for their projects or for their learning as such. But however, in higher semesters, even in our institution as well, the students try to find out a solution problem as well. So like you suggested, it could be a really interesting study as such.
Yeah, I really like that question as well, and I would like to continue with this discussion. We also are interested in the role of the problem in this motivating aspect, and from our experience and also from qualitative but also quantitative studies we've done, we do see an interaction between the problems and the motivation. For example, but it's a very complex situation, because we also had, when students already entered the course with a certain type of motivation, they sometimes viewed the problem as of being within a lesser quality or less interesting than students who already had a higher motivation. So there also seems to be an interaction on how they use the problem or how they make it their own, sort of, as it were, in the program, based on already how they enter the course. That makes it quite complex, but we also get a lot of feedback from students that in our curriculum, everything is problem-based. So they always have the same format, same procedure to tackle problems. And then, especially after they have done it for 6 months or something like that, they are very becoming more negative about the approach, because they say, yeah, we are always doing the same. So then the problems or the meaningful aspects of it seem to lose a bit of their value, because they always do the same thing and they really want to see more variation or something like that. And I'm not sure if everybody else experiences similar problems, but we don't know always how to deal with that.
Yes, it becomes mechanical, I would say. It just, yeah.
There is something very interesting with this research on problem-based learning, focusing on aspects like teamwork, problems, and motivation, because all these three topics have been at the heart of the research on problem-based learning since the beginning. And in some cases, I think it takes time for things really to settle, or you might say things come up time and time again. So I would like to make a comment to the people from India that the research on the problem, it reminds me of a paper published by Jeff Norman from McMaster University, something over 40 years ago in the mid-80s. And in this paper, he talks about problems, problem solving, and problem-based learning. It's published in Medical Education. And he identifies that problems, I need to repeat that in the presentation, you indicated that the problem needed to be difficult. And the difficulty of a problem is not something that is an absolute given. The difficulty of the problem depends on who is working with the problem. Something might be very easy for the teacher and very impossible for the student. So if you look at these problems as challenges to start a learning process for the student, then maybe you need not just to look at difficult problems, but you need, and that's one of the comments from Jeff Norman, you need to look at problems that students will encounter if they were working in practice. In practice, it may be very common day-to-day problems, but for them, it is a challenge which needs to be used to build their knowledge base. Please comment.
I would like to comment on this. Like Eric, you mentioned the problems which are difficult to the instructors. or the problems which are easier to the instructors may be difficult for the students. That is definitely the case with many of the students, even in engineering at India also. So while the instructors are crafting the problems, this statement, I made it in the video as well. I would like to repeat it. We were very careful even in while writing the article as well. The problem should be difficult, yet attainable by the students. Yet attainable by the students. And when we say attainable, it is again a debatable word as such. So definitely not all students will be able to attain it to the degree which we are expecting, or might be even there will be variations in the attainment as well. That is definitely going to happen. Eric, you are muted. Eric, we are not able to hear you.
You are muted, Eric. Now no.
I tried to unmute with the space bar, but that did not appear to work.
You have to keep it pressed.
Okay. Anyway, I've unmuted now. And I would like to make the bridge to the paper from the people from Rotterdam, because that also creates a difficulty, a difference in motivation. Students who find something, let's say, difficult but attainable, they may be highly motivated. If the level of the difficulty is too much, then it is not really a challenge for them. It is out of their reach. If it is too easy, it is also not a challenge. So it will depend on a right combination of problems for a specific group of students. And I think that's what you were looking for, Lisette.
Yes, indeed. And that's why I also liked the presentation about the problem, the second presentation from India, because I think it's very important to look at, to analyze your problems in such a way to make sure that you see what type of problem you've actually created. And I don't think they will be the same they won't be experienced the same by all students, but I do think you should strike the optimal balance between not being too easy, not being too difficult, to be able to get the best learning outcomes, but also I think for motivation. But that is, in my experience, always quite a challenge, because it's sometimes very difficult to judge beforehand when you develop something how it will be perceived by the students. So it's also a continuous process of adapting your materials each year to make sure that they work. But that's I think very it's very important, but also very difficult. I'm not sure if everybody agrees with me on that, but I also had a question about the second presentation. I really liked also the solution graph that you showed for the problem. But can you make that for each problem? Because I've never done that before, and I was wondering how to apply it myself.
Okay. Solution graphs basically are the small scale version of functional blocks or functional diagram, which are put for usually design problems. The kind of the problems which you give to the students are design problems. While they solve the problems, they eventually in their process of solving, they create something called as a functional diagram. So functional diagrams are very specific to the kind of the problem the students have understood. They have, the problem definition they have done. But the kind of the problem statement which we have given to the students, but only looking at that, the instructor will be able to put a very, how can I put it? A bare bone version of the solutions, basically. So if I say a cup crushing machine is to be created, a problem, a design problem, a cup crushing machine. So now the moment the instructor says this problem, what are the different kind of the functions the instructor will be able to, represent as such? And what could be the kind of the flow which can happen in the machine as such, the bare bone version as such. So that particular kind of a graph which is plotted, we have called it as a solution graph. Now the kind of the functional diagram the students create will be much more elaborate when compared with the solution graphs. It will be definitely much more elaborate when compared with the solution graphs. But solution graphs are something like, they are the bare bone versions of the problem itself.
Sanjeev, may I add something here, if you permit?
Sure, ma'am.
Yes. During the time we craft the problems, the instructors develop these functional graphs by identifying, as Sanjeev said, some bare bone functions. It's obvious that students may develop much more better functions, but we're looking at a minimum subset of functions. So once we identify this list, we also understand what is the relationship between these functions. Are they linear or bidirectional? Are they cyclic? Do we have loops in those functions? Now, if it is linear, it's very easy for students to develop those, to design prototypes because it's linear. But if there is a cyclic relationship, data is flowing or material is flowing between different functions, it becomes difficult at first year engineering. So we are trying to keep the relationships linear, maybe one cycle of data. And by doing this, we have 4 categories of problems. The first one, as Eric said, are very easy. But the category 4 are very difficult. They're not only faculty time intensive, I really need to spend my hours in the evening mentoring students, but they're highly motivation intensive. So we say that in our paper, try and see category 2 and 3 problems. They're attainable by pushing students a little bit. So just to close what Sanjeev was saying. Sanjeev, over to you.
Thank you, Priti.
Yeah, thank you. This is very helpful. Yeah. But I think it's still possible to also, I'd like the idea of, well, I don't work in engineering and we also work in the social sciences. We are always interested in mechanisms and explaining certain things with ideas. And we ask students often to make a concept map of things. And I was reminded with the solutions graph, I think that it could also be applicable in other domains to make it to have it more simple and then more complex by the student. So I like the idea about it a lot. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to continue. Who has a question, well, or a comment on the topic that we are discussing?
I actually have a comment, Eric, because I think this actually first question is if this solution graph is actually developed by the students with the tutors, or only by the tutors, or only by the students.
Solution graphs are created by the instructors. They are not created by the students. So when the instructors when they craft the problem, in order to understand the complexity within the problem, they try to put a solution graph.
Okay.
Looking at the solution graph, they will try to understand what kind of the complexity can the students face in future.
Yeah, because my comment and my reflection actually on that is this is a process. And by being a process, if the students know the rule underneath this process, they can actually then generalize. So they can actually do a reflection, like similar to the reflection cycle we saw in the first presentation. And I think that's also what the concept map Lisette was referring to, is also a good tool, so they can actually visualize their learning, they visualize relations, and then they can actually start reflecting on this. So if they come to another problem that is more complex, that maybe is not design problems, but another type of problem, they can use that tool for themselves to actually start to see into the process how it is. What are the elements? What are the variables? What are the functions, as you say? What are the relations? So it becomes a tool for them. I don't know if you ever considered this. I know first year is very challenging in this consent, so things should not come all at the same time because it's too much information for the students as well. But it's from a progression and a learning progression point of view, from first year to last year's, how this could actually be used for scaffolding the students on this process as well. Yeah, so that was just my reflection on what you said. Yeah.
Just to add to the points which you have mentioned, design problems, while we are solving the design problems, if we put a functional graph, it is obvious, it obviously becomes easier for us to solve. By default, majority of the textbooks on engineering design or engineering design process, they suggest to create a functional graph. And functional graph is something similar to concept map itself. May not be exactly the same, but something similar to concept map itself. But the problem is, like you mentioned, for a first year student, how easy it is for a student to put a functional graph or functional block diagram, or might be a concept map, is a kind of a challenge, which we all know. But despite of it, for a design problem, if the functional block diagram or functional graph is put, then the student will be able to solve it very easily, very comfortably.
Yes, just to close this discussion, Dr. Aida, but during the process of solving the design problem, during one of the phases, that is during the detailed design, the students develop a transparent box or the white box, the glass box model, in which and functional tree. So students will do it maybe 2 months down the 1.5 month down the line. But that is after we have identified a set of problems. What we are talking about is how do I create or craft those design problems which are challenging yet attainable. So students will do it, but during the solving the design process as a glass box or a functional tree. But this solution graph is for instructors to evaluate whether are these problems feasible for students.
Yeah. I have one comment that I would like to make. How do you say that? It is something that I'm remembering from many years back when I was working with problem-based learning in the Faculty of Architecture. Something similar happened. There was a discussion, how can the instructors, the teachers, make the estimation of what students are capable of knowing? And in particular, one facilitator, one tutor does not know what the other one does. So it makes a difference for the student who is their group facilitator, and they should all give the same answers. So then the teachers among themselves, they started to create a tutorial guide. And the tutorial guide, basically, just like your schemes, it gave all the answers that were necessary for the students to find in their discussion. And then what happened? Some students got hold of this bookwork with tutorial guidelines, and it became the most copied piece of paper in the whole faculty, because with that piece of paper, they could stop thinking for themselves. And then it worked against the whole idea of problem-based learning in that faculty, because the problem-based learning became find the tutorial guidelines and then you know what to do. So it is some kind of a circular discussion, and you have to be careful that if you prepare too much, you will take away the challenge for the students.
Eric, I certainly agree with you. But that will not be the case with the solution graphs, especially for design problems. Because solution graphs are plotted, or they are put in the very beginning of the solution problem solving process of the design problem. However, the students, even though they get hold of these solution graphs, even with these solution graphs, they will be able to do very least. They are supposed to do many other things apart from the solution graph.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure it will be completely different. It is different every time, but yeah, sometimes things have been done before, and that is what we use our sources for, to look back into history. And sometimes we need to repeat to make sure in our own situation. Sometimes we can learn from the past. Who would like to continue with a question or a comment or a general topic on problem-based learning and teamwork? It's such a pity that Colombia dropped out.
Well, I did like your comment about the tutorial manual being copied, but we don't have that problem, but we do have the problem that because some of the problems stay the same too long, that students share their solutions or their products they have developed over time, and And then also the problem is becoming less effective because they just look at the prior products of the students before them and don't think for themselves. And I don't know how to prevent that. I think we need to change it up more to, or keep it more open. I think that's, I think the design problems that were presented could be a solution to that. If we keep it, yeah, if you make it more like that, then I think it's not possible to completely share the or use the product made by another student again, maybe, but that's interesting.
Lisette, I agree with you. You know, even we also face the similar kind of a situation wherein even though the design problems, even though we give the design problems to the student, crafting a design problem is a huge task. When we look from all these perspective of, you know, how challenging is the problem to the student, and there are many parameters which we are supposed to look into before we craft. So if we look into this process, it is not an easy task for any instructor to create a design problem. You know, during our initial days, possibly we were able to craft around 10 to 15 problem statements as such. But you know, every year and year we are supposed to create such kind of problems, which is certainly a draining task. And we definitely don't get so much of innovative ideas even in our brain as well. It is quite a challenge.
I can imagine. It's also very, I think, very impressive because it's even still, if you've created 15 problems, that's a lot of creativity involved, and you need to change it up probably each time. So I think it's very
It's quite a challenge for us, for the reason that every semester we give approximately 15 to 20 problem statements to the students, and every semester, or at least 1 year, you know, once in 1 year or once in 2 years, we are supposed to change them compulsorily. You know, we can't just repeat them. It is not going to happen. If we repeat them, there is a high possibility, like you mentioned, that the students may get hold of some senior students' data and they may show the same for the design problems as well. That may happen. We really try hard to, you know, avoid such kind of situations, but it is a challenging task, that is for sure.
Yeah, indeed, because it's you need to put in a lot of time preparing all the materials, and I think that's what we could do better at our institute, because we recycle the problems too much, I think. So I have experienced sometimes that they used one problem for 10 years, for example, that they never really changed it, or only at minimal levels, and then yeah, it's not very challenging anymore at the end because everybody already could find the solution somewhere in prior years. I like the idea of changing it up each year, although it is, of course, a heavy time load for the teachers.
I think it is really good we have this discussion. I think this is a discussion at the core of what problem-based learning is about, because the idea that teachers need to construct the best problems for students as a challenge so they are motivated for study, in a sense, it still comes from the, let's say, old approach to teaching and learning, where the teacher is the source of all knowledge. And to the core of problem-based learning, it actually is that the learning is most important. Learning is much more important than the source of the knowledge. So the students should use the problems to define their own learning goals and to overcome situations that the teachers has not even thought about. So the potential of problem-based learning is that it can initiate a learning process which is way beyond the level that can be attained by the teachers. But that is the mental somersault teachers will have to make when they start implementing problem-based learning. You have to let go some of the controls.
Yes, I agree. And that's also the challenge sometimes, to convince the people to, and also for yourself sometimes, to let go of the control, because that's the main argument of the main. Yeah, but what if they don't learn what I want them to learn in the end? And that's always a struggle.
I have had this discussion with students when they were complaining about problems. They were complaining that the teachers did not give them the right challenging problems. And then I just told them, what is to keep you from defining your own problem, your own version of the problem, to make it more challenging? The problem-based learning belongs to the student, so you can use it as a stepping stone, but you don't have to follow exactly the guideline of the problem as it was intended by the teachers. And that I noticed that was quite opening up for the students. And in the research to what extent problem-based learning is motivating, it would certainly be very much of interest to include a variable like to what extent do students feel that they are in control of the problem-based learning? To what extent is it their PBL and not something that is thought of by the teachers and it's just another trick and next year there will be a new trick?
Yes, I agree. But not only the control, but also the because there could be objective control present, but if they don't experience the control, because what I often hear the students say, they say I have control, but the teacher is still going to grade me in a certain way with the exam in a certain way, and if I don't do that, then I'm still going to fail this course. So they sometimes feel control, but they also feel restricted by the testing or assessment procedures we implement.
What you're mentioning right now is exactly the motivation for the introduction of the progress test in Maastricht, a testing of progress of the students that is independent of the particular courses that they have been following, and that is not defined by a teacher of a single course. So students are not given the opportunity to try and define what the teacher wants them to know and limit their study to those areas.
Can I just make a short comment? Because what I observe here, I work with problem-based learning in education for sustainable development in engineering education. So I'm very interested in the problem, because the problem, if we let the students define the problem, is actually where they can have the more interdisciplinarity coming, because they actually have to narrow. So the problem can be complex, but it can be complex if we also have social, environmental elements into it, that they had to kind of, unfold and separate, and then, okay, this is the technical solution for this context in this given time. So there's other layers here. And what I found is that, Lizette, precisely that we have some programs that some students actually define the problems. They are giving a theme, an open theme, and from there they go to problem design and then problem solving. And we have programs that they give the students a project proposal, similar to what Priti and Sanjeev was saying. And what the students say, not all, and I think this is the interesting point I observe, not all, some students, they are simply not happy. They are not satisfied with this type of proposals because they are outdated, because they are owned by the teacher, by the supervisor or the instructor. So they try to find outside things that fulfill them. And I think this is very interesting, because what kind of raises now from a research perspective is that we do not have the same students throughout the entire education. We do not have the same drivers or motivations in the students, but we have a strict curriculum for all students, right? We have a curriculum for all, at least here. And this somehow, what I see is that these students, they try to find a way, and they are not worried if they don't know. I have a student telling me in my face, I'm not worried about the knowledge. I can get the knowledge. I know where to get the knowledge. And I was like, wow. It's the opportunity that I'm missing, So I see some internal struggles here. And then I wonder actually if we can profile, or if we can understand the drivers of some students, we can also provide some opportunities within the curricula for them to fulfill that. Because I wonder if they actually are satisfied when they finish their education. I wonder also if they actually fulfill their full potential as learners in the education. So this is some reflections I have as part of my research at this moment. And I totally agree that, because we also observe that we have students that they go for what is given, and they need that the teacher needs to control more. And in the first year, what I observe in the last semester is that some students are very good driving the project, because the team, they can immediately establish a strong team with a lot of synergy and everything. And then they are driven, they drive the project, and we can give them challenges, difficulties. They go because they are a team. The others, they are completely lost in establishing a team as well. So they cannot take care of the project, or they cannot take care of the learning process, because they are completely lost in the setting of the environment for learning. And I could see these two different teams actually running in parallel, completely. I could see, and the way I could see it is because I asked them to actually report on this. What did they learn? And I had motivation, as well as one of the parts when they lose motivation, why they lose motivation and everything. Yeah, so I think this complexity, this relation, and how the curriculum is also done in the sense of restricting, with a lot of restrictions sometimes from top, something is being lost, I would say. But this is just a food for thought.
I think that is a real excellent way of ending the session, Ida.
Okay, thank you.
we did not succeed in answering all the questions. We're leaving, in fact, with more questions than we started. And I think that that makes this a very productive session.
I think it was a very good and interesting sessions. Thank you very much for your presentations and your discussions. Really, I really enjoyed it. And I know I'm just
to thank the presenters, and thank Aalborg University for facilitating this, and hope to see you, all of you, once in a real live session. Is there anyone who would like to make one final comment before we close?
Would you permit me?
Yeah.
Just to add to what Dr. Guerra said, I realized one thing: problem spotting and problem solving are two different competencies.
Yeah.
So,
I totally agree.
So for problem spotting, I need a lot of stakeholder engagement, back and forth negotiation. And by the time I craft my problem, a semester is over.
Yeah.
And that's what you mean by curricular restrictions.
Yes.
So that's the reason at first year or at early years of engineering, we are focusing on problem solving, so that students get a first-hand hands-on on what real engineers do on the field, and create something to excite them. So that was what I had to say. We are concentrating on problem solving, and problem spotting, we are leaving it to higher semesters, maybe the second year or something.
Thank you very much. I think that makes an end of this session. Wish you all a very happy, good day, and maybe see you around somewhere.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bom dia.
Boa tarde. Yes. Bye bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.